Ever wish learning was like plugging into a port and bam, knowledge downloaded?
Like in the Matrix.
Haha, exactly.
Yeah.
But seriously, there's so much information out there. How do we keep up?
Right. It can feel overwhelming.
Totally. But that's what we're diving into today. How to accelerate learning. We've got tips from the latest research and some real experts. So get ready to take some notes.
This is going to be good.
I know, right? We're talking about things like spaced repetition and even something called the Feynman technique.
Sounds intense.
It is, in the best way.
Yeah.
Once you get these techniques down, it's like having a cheat code for your brain.
That's a great way to put it. It's not about magic, though. Learning faster is about working with your brain, not against it.
I like that. So where do we start? What's the first step?
Well, before you dive into any pool, got to make sure you know where you're swimming to, right? It's about setting clear goals.
Makes sense. So it's not just, I want to learn, say, a new language. It's more than that.
Yeah, it's about having a map for your learning journey. Like, why do you want to learn that language? What will it allow you to do?
So it's about connecting it to a purpose, a real outcome.
Absolutely. And that's where SMART goals come in. You know, specific, measurable, achievable, all that good stuff.
Right, I've heard of those.
So instead of, I want to learn Python, which is vague, a SMART goal would be, I want to build a basic website using Python in the next 3 months.
So there's a concrete goal, a timeline.
Exactly.
Love that. It's like giving your brain's GPS a destination.
Perfect analogy.
And speaking of being active, what about active versus passive learning? Is it better to just passively absorb information or to actually do something with it?
Oh, there's been tons of research on this. Active learning, hands down, is way more effective.
Really? So like building a website versus just watching videos about it?
Yeah, there was this study back in 2014, I think. It was published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. Pretty legit, right?
Yeah.
And they found that students who actively did stuff, you know, like solving problems or teaching others what they'd learned, they did way better on tests than those who just sat there listening to lectures.
Interesting.
It's like the difference between hearing about baking a cake and actually getting your hands dirty in the kitchen.
I get it. You're not just a spectator, you're a participant.
Exactly.
What are some good examples of active learning? Things people can try.
Well, teaching is huge. If you can explain something clearly to someone else, that means you really get it.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then there's problem solving, you know, facing real challenges that make you use what you're learning.
So next time I'm learning something new, I should grab a friend and try to teach it to them.
Exactly.
I love it. Okay, on to something that's always sounded super cool to me. Spaced repetition. Is this the secret to remembering things long term? No more all-nighters cramming.
You got it. Spaced repetition is all about revisiting what you learn, but at these specific intervals.
Okay, walk me through that.
Let's say you're learning a new language and there's a new word you want to remember. So you'd review it a few hours later, then the next day, then a few days after that, and so on. You're spacing it out.
Interesting. It's like these little memory nudges reminding your brain not to forget.
Exactly. And there's science behind it too. Research has shown that those spaced out study sessions really help your brain build strong neural connections. And that means better memory in the long run.
So it actually works.
Big time. There are even apps out there like Anki that use all these fancy algorithms to figure out the best spacing for you based on how well you're remembering stuff. It's awesome.
Wow, technology is wild.
Right. It's like having a personal tutor for your memory.
I need to check that out. Okay, one more technique that's always intrigued me. The Feynman technique. I've heard of this guy, Feynman, right? The physicist.
Yeah, Richard Feynman. Brilliant guy. And this technique is all about making complex stuff simple. Like the idea is if you can't explain it simply, you don't really understand it.
That's a good point.
It's deceptively simple, but so powerful.
Okay, break it down for me. How does it work?
So you pick a concept you want to learn, then pretend you're explaining it to someone who knows nothing about it, like a kid.
I like that.
Right. So you can't use jargon or anything complicated, and that's where the magic happens. As you try to explain it simply, you're going to hit these points where you realize, oh, I don't actually get this part.
So it exposes the gaps in your knowledge.
Exactly. And then you go back to your books, do some more research, fill in those gaps, and try explaining it again, even simpler.
It's like a continuous cycle of learning, refining, making it clearer and clearer.
You got it. And by doing that, you build this rock-solid understanding.
Amazing. I can't wait to try this out. We've covered a lot already. Setting goals, active learning, spaced repetition, this Feynman technique. That's a lot of brain power.
It is. But our brains can't go full throttle all the time. Breaks are super important.
Oh, for sure. I'm a big fan of the Pomodoro technique. Have you heard of that?
Oh yeah, the 25 minutes on, 5 minutes off thing.
Right.
Classic.
Yep. It's a lifesaver for work, but it's good for learning too.
Definitely. I mean, our brains have limits. We can't focus intensely for hours and hours. It's just not how they work.
So those breaks actually help our brains process what we've learned.
They do. It prevents burnout and lets your mind actually absorb the information.
Like hitting the refresh button.
Exactly. We'll get into more about breaks later, but let's keep things moving.
Sounds good. What's next on our brain-boosting agenda?
Well, you know how they say variety is the spice of life? Same goes for learning.
Keep things interesting. Don't get stuck in a rut.
Exactly. It's called interleaving, and it's all about switching between different ways of studying or even different topics.
Give me an example.
Sure. Let's say you're studying for a history exam. So instead of just reading the textbook for hours, try reading for a bit, then do some practice questions, then maybe sketch out a timeline or watch a short video, mix it up.
Oh, I see. It's like cross-training for your brain. Makes total sense.
It does. And it helps you make connections between different ideas, which is key for deeper understanding.
I like it. Speaking of connections, let's talk about visualization. I'm a super visual learner, so when I'm trying to learn, I naturally picture things in my head. Does that really help?
You bet it does. Our brains are wired for visuals, and there's a ton of research showing that bringing visuals into your learning can make a big difference.
So it's not just me.
Not at all. Visuals help your brain understand and remember things better.
What if you're not a visual learner, though? Can you still use visualization?
For sure. It's not just about closing your eyes and seeing vivid pictures. It's more about using visual aids, like drawing diagrams, making mind maps, even using different colored highlighters in your notes.
That's more about finding ways to make the information visual.
Exactly. Even if you don't think you're a visual learner, your brain still loves visuals.
I'm definitely going to experiment with that more. Okay, we visualize it, mix things up, taking our breaks. Time to see what we've actually learned, right?
Time to put it to the test. And this is where retrieval practice comes in.
Oh yeah, this is the one where you test yourself without looking back at your notes.
You got it. It might sound scary, but it's one of the best ways to make sure you actually know this stuff.
I get a little nervous just thinking about it, to be honest. But why is it so good?
Well, when you're trying to remember something and you don't just look at your notes, it forces your brain to work harder. And that effort actually makes the memory stronger. It's like lifting weights for your brain.
So the more I struggle to remember, the better I'll remember it later on.
You got it. It's counterintuitive, but it works. Retrieval practice builds stronger neural connections.
Well, okay. Challenge accepted. What are some ways to do this retrieval practice?
Lots of ways. Flashcards are classic. Or try summarizing something you've just read from memory before peeking at your notes. Or just explain a concept out loud to yourself without looking anything up.
I can see how that would be really helpful. Okay, this next tip sounds a little counterintuitive. You're saying we should all become teachers.
In a way, yes. Teaching what you've learned, even if it's just to a friend, or even your dog.
Wait, explain the French Revolution to my dog.
Haha, well, maybe start with something simpler. But the point is, when you teach something, you have to really understand it. You have to organize your thoughts, anticipate questions.
It forces you to think about it from a different angle.
Right. It can reveal gaps in your knowledge, which is a good thing because then you know what to go back and study more.
I like that. Find a student, become the expert. This is great stuff. But we've been going strong for a while now, and I think our brains deserve a little TLC.
I agree. And speaking of TLC, we can't forget about the most important ingredient for a healthy brain: sleep.
Oh, tell me about it. I'm a huge fan of sleep. But seriously, how does sleep actually help us learn?
Well, when we sleep, our brains don't just shut down. They're busy working behind the scenes, consolidating memories, processing information, basically getting everything organized and ready for the next day.
So all those all-nighters are actually counterproductive.
Pretty much. A good night's sleep is essential for learning. It's when your brain hits the save button on all that new knowledge.
So no more cramming sessions for me.
Smart move. Your brain will thank you.
We've covered so much already. It's clear that there's no magic bullet for learning faster, but these techniques, they can really give our brains a boost.
Totally. And the best part is you don't have to try to do everything at once. Pick one or two things that resonate with you and just experiment.
That's great advice. Okay, as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, let's leave our listeners with something to think about.
I like it. A little homework assignment.
Exactly. So think of something you learned recently. It could be anything. Now, imagine trying to explain it to someone who knows nothing about it.
Maybe try that Feynman technique we talked about. See how simplifying it for someone else can make you understand it better.
Ooh, that's a good one. We'll be back with even more learning secrets in part 2. Until then, stay curious.
And keep those brains active. It's wild, right? How even small tweaks to how we learn can make a big difference.
Yeah, totally. And I think that's what's really hitting home for me in this deep dive. It's not just about the techniques. It's about like a mindset shift.
Oh, absolutely. Being curious,
Right.
willing to try new things.
Exactly. And that's what makes learning fun, not a chore.
I love that. Learning as an adventure.
Okay, back to something we were talking about before, that Anki app. Spaced repetition, I gotta say, it sounds like it could be life-changing, especially for someone like me. My memory's not the best.
Oh, Anki's a game changer for sure. It takes all the guesswork out of spaced repetition.
Yeah, explain that again. How does it work?
So it uses these algorithms to schedule when you review stuff. Like if you're having trouble with a certain concept, it'll make you see it more often until it sinks in.
That makes sense.
And because it's spread out over time, that information is way more likely to become like a permanent part of your memory.
No more last-minute panic before a test.
Exactly.
Love it. Okay, I want to shift gears a bit and talk about the Feynman technique again. The whole idea of explaining things simply, like you're talking to a child, it just, I don't know, it clicks with me.
It's so powerful, and there's a real cognitive science reason it works. You see, when you break a concept down to its simplest form, you can't hide behind jargon. You have to truly understand the core principles.
Right. No shortcuts.
And as you're doing that, trying to simplify, that's when you usually discover the weak spots in your understanding.
Like, oh wait, I don't actually know why that happens.
Exactly. And then, boom, you know it to go back and study more.
It's a built-in self-check.
I love that. A self-check for your knowledge. And once you've figured out those gaps, you can go back to your books, do more research and try to explain it again, even simpler.
So cool. This could be used for anything, really.
Oh, absolutely. From super complex science stuff to like philosophy, anything.
Well, I'm adding this to my toolkit for sure. Okay, switching gears again, something that's often forgotten but so important. Breaks. We all need them.
Breaks are non-negotiable, honestly. For learning, for work, for everything. Our brains just aren't built to focus nonstop for hours.
Yeah, I hit a wall pretty quickly if I try to power through.
We all do. Our attention spans, they have limits.
So breaks aren't just about resting. They actually help us learn better.
Yep. They help us process information, make connections, really solidify what we've learned. And it's all backed by science, by the way.
So techniques like Pomodoro, those short bursts of focus with breaks in between, that's actually the best way to work.
For a lot of people, yeah. It's about working smarter, not harder.
I love that. And it helps prevent burnout, which is definitely something I struggle with.
Oh, burnout is a learning killer. When we're exhausted, we just can't learn effectively.
So breaks, they're not optional. They're like essential.
They are. It's about finding that balance, focus, and rest.
Speaking of balance, remember interleaving, cross-training for the brain.
Yes. One of my favorites.
So remind us, what was that all about?
It's all about mixing things up. Different subjects, different ways of studying, keeping your brain on its toes.
So instead of like spending hours on just one topic, I might switch between a few different things.
Exactly. It helps you see connections, makes it more fun, keeps your brain engaged. It's like creating this web of knowledge instead of these separate, isolated bits of information. And those connections, they're what make learning really meaningful.
Makes total sense. Okay, back to visualization again. I gotta say, this one's a bit personal for me. I'm very visual, so I do this naturally. When I'm learning, I try to create these pictures in my mind. Does that really make a difference?
Huge difference. It's not just you. Our brains are just wired for visual processing. Bringing those visuals into learning, it supercharges our understanding and memory.
But what if someone's not a visual learner? Can they still use visualization?
Absolutely. It doesn't have to be about like super vivid mental imagery. It's more about those visual aids like diagrams, charts, mind maps, even just using different colors in your notes.
Okay, so it's about translating the information into a visual format.
Exactly. Even if you don't think you're a visual person, your brain will still love those visuals.
Good to know. It's like adding another dimension to learning.
I like that. Another dimension. I'm going to steal that.
Go for it. Okay, next up, retrieval practice.
This one, I'm still a little nervous about it, to be honest.
Yeah.
Testing myself without notes, it's scary.
I get it. But trust me, the benefits are huge. Retrieval practice is one of the best ways to like cement your learning, make it stick.
So why is it so powerful? I mean, I feel like I rely on my notes so much.
It comes down to how our brains work.
Yeah.
When we try to remember something, and we don't just look at our notes, it forces those brain cells to fire.
And that makes it stronger.
Makes those connections stronger. It's like, imagine you're lifting weights. The more you push yourself, the stronger your muscles get. Right. Same with your brain.
So it's like mental weightlifting.
Exactly.
Right.
Retrieval practice builds mental muscle.
I'm starting to like this idea a little more now. So how can we do this? Lots of ways. Flashcards, quizzes, even just closing your eyes and trying to recall what you just read. The key is to challenge yourself to remember without looking.
Okay, challenge accepted. Now this next technique, it still kind of blows my mind. We're all supposed to become teachers.
Haha. Well, not in the traditional sense, maybe. But teaching what you've learned, even casually, it's incredibly powerful.
I can see how that would be true for like an actual teacher, but for everyone else.
Oh yeah, it applies to all of us. It doesn't have to be formal. Explaining a concept to a friend, writing a blog post, even talking to your pet about it.
My cat might not be the most attentive student, but I get the idea.
The point is, when you teach, you have to really, really know the stuff. You have to organize it, simplify it, think of how to answer questions.
It takes your understanding to a whole new level.
Exactly. And it can help you find those gaps in your knowledge too, which is always good.
Right, it shows you what you still need to work on.
And it can be fun too, sharing what you've learned with others.
Okay, I'm convinced. Time to find a student and put on my teacher hat. Now, before we wrap up, gotta talk about sleep again. It's like the foundation of everything.
Sleep is essential. No way around it. It's when the real learning magic happens, when your brain is consolidating everything.
We know sleep deprivation's bad. But can you get specific about how sleep helps us learn?
Of course. First off, memory consolidation. During sleep, our brains are literally replaying what we experienced, strengthening those neural connections, moving information from short-term to long-term memory.
Wow, so it's like our brains are reviewing everything while we sleep.
Pretty much. And sleep does more than that. It helps clear out toxins, all the junk that can mess with our thinking. It's like hitting the reset button so we wake up ready to go.
Sounds like good sleep is crucial for a healthy brain.
Absolutely. It's about quality and quantity.
Okay, no more skimping on sleep for me. I'm a convert.
You won't regret it.
Well, we've covered a ton of ground in this episode. It's clear that there's no single trick to learning faster. But with these techniques, we can definitely give our brains a big advantage.
We can. And the key is find what works for you. Experiment, be curious, don't be afraid to try something new.
Great advice. Okay, as we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I'm curious to hear from our listeners. What technique are you most excited to try?
Yeah, let us know. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Pick one technique this week and give it a shot. See how it changes your learning game.
We'll be back in part 3 with even more learning power-ups. Until then, keep those brains buzzing.
And keep exploring.
Welcome back to our deep dive on learning faster. We've covered so much already, but we're not done yet.
Nope, still got more brain-boosting tricks up our sleeve.
I love it. Okay, let's pick up where we left off talking about visualization. This one's really interesting to me because I'm very visual, so I already do this without even thinking about it. When I'm learning, I try to see pictures in my mind.
You and me both. It's so powerful.
But I'm wondering, what about people who aren't natural visual learners? Can they still use visualization?
Totally. Visualization, it's not just about having those super clear mental pictures in your head. It's more about finding visual aids that work for you. Like diagrams, charts, even mind maps, those can be super helpful.
Yeah, mind maps are great.
Right. Or even just something simple like using different colored pens when you're taking notes. Anything that makes the information more visual.
So it's really about finding ways to translate the information into a visual format that makes sense to you.
Exactly. Because even if you don't think you're a visual learner, your brain still loves to process information visually.
It's like adding an extra layer to your learning.
Yeah. You're engaging a different part of your brain.
Love that. Okay, let's move on to another technique we talked about before. Retrieval practice. This is the one where you quiz yourself. No cheating.
Yeah, no peeking at your notes.
I gotta be honest, I'm still kind of scared of this one. I really rely on my notes. But you're saying it's actually the best way to remember stuff?
It is, and we talked about how it works, but here's another way to think about it. When you struggle to remember something, it forces your brain to make a stronger connection.
It's like what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
Right. For your brain, anyway. That struggle, it actually builds more robust memories.
So the harder it is to remember, the better I'll remember it later on.
It's counterintuitive, but yeah.
Okay, starting to see it. So flashcards, quizzes, those are all retrieval practice, right? Anything else?
Tons of ways to do it. Try explaining something out loud without looking at your notes, or just closing your eyes and trying to summarize what you just read, whatever makes you actively retrieve the information.
Got it. No more passive reviewing. Now, I want to talk more about the whole become a teacher thing. This idea still fascinates me.
It's such a good one. Teaching, even in a really casual way, is one of the most powerful ways to solidify your knowledge.
I get that for, like, actual teachers, professors, but for the average person, do you really think teaching helps?
Absolutely. It doesn't have to be formal at all. It can be as simple as explaining something to a friend, or even just talking it out with someone who has a different point of view.
Yeah, I can see how that would make you think about it in new ways.
Exactly. When you teach, you have to really organize your thoughts and anticipate questions. And sometimes you even realize, oh, wait, I don't actually understand this part as well as I thought, which is a good thing.
Oh, you where the gaps are.
Right. It helps you figure out what you still need to learn.
I'm going to try this out and try to explain some of this learning stuff to my partner tonight. See how it goes. Okay, one last thing we have to talk about. Sleep. Can't forget about sleep.
The foundation of a healthy brain. Seriously, sleep is so essential for learning.
We've talked about how bad sleep deprivation is, but can you go into more detail about why sleep is so good for learning?
Sure. So, first off, during sleep, our brains are literally replaying what we learned. It's like a highlight reel.
That's amazing. So it's not just resting, it's actually strengthening those memories.
Exactly. And it does even more than that. Clears out toxins, processes information. Sleep is when your brain does its most important work.
Okay, I'm officially convinced sleep is a non-negotiable now.
Good. You won't regret it.
Yeah.
It's all about making sleep a priority, setting up a good routine, all that good stuff.
Well, this has been an incredible deep dive. So many great techniques. I feel like I'm ready to level up my learning game.
I know, right? It's all about finding what works for you, experimenting, having fun with it.
That's the most important part. So, listeners, what resonated with you most in this deep dive? What are you going to try out?
Yeah, let us know. We love hearing from you. Learning's a lifelong journey, and there's always something new to discover.
And as always, stay curious. Thanks for joining us.
See you next time.